Hello everyone, back with another YouTube video. In this YouTube video it's another exam tutorial video. Technically slightly late of course because this paper has already come and gone this current GCSE season, but nevertheless it's still relevant for the next one. And I have actually got my teacher to mark this one, so this will be a pretty nice in-depth one to how I could have actually improved myself as well. The question entails is a 12 marker based on the Cold War paper, and it is this: how useful are sources B and C to historians studying Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe after 1945? And here are the two sources, if that focuses. There we are. So straight away we've got 12 marker. So 12 marker, that must mean 2 paragraphs, well 3 paragraphs, one of which is a conclusion. So 2 paragraphs, conclusion, 3 paragraphs, whatever works for you. That also means we're spending 10 to 15 minutes on it. And again, of course, we will need to have our point, evidence, explain, but also being sources, we've also got to talk about MAD, motive, audience, sorry, not MAD, mutually assured destruction, that's not it, MAC, motives, audience, context, what's the motive of the source, who's the audience for, and what's the context behind it. And that's to really hit those top marks, level 3, level 4 answer, and also telling that provenance, being a source, we can talk about provenance, who wrote it. And also, it does say how useful are both sources B and C. You don't have to say which one's more useful, like in a Germany paper. You can just kind of, sit on the fence if you really want to, and just say about how they are both useful. And these ones in particular are both useful. So let's have a look at the sources. So source B, we can see it is simply Stalin dancing across Eastern Europe, and it is a French poster, and of course French people like Charles de Gaulle, definitely very anti-communist, of course, fighting in French Indochina at the time of 1950 against communist forces, but of course have a bad opinion on communism, hence why Stalin is denoted as that. So that's a bit of what you could talk about already about the mainline motive, audience, context there. And then source C is an extract from an East German, so of course a communist, about we East Germans need friendship with other nations to help us benefit from the massive change in Eastern Europe. The Soviet Union has transformed Poland, where landlords and industrialists are no longer in charge, but farmers and workers instead. Poland owns its freedom and coming to the Soviet Union. We can enjoy the same benefits. So straight away, they are definitely both useful to an extent. So looking at source B straight away. Now source B is definitely useful to an extent. Definitely useful to extent. I mean, third expansion, that definitely does, you can definitely reference there the Eastern Bloc. And of course it says after 1945 being the main trigger word there. You would even not mention the May the 11th, 1955 creation of the Warsaw Pact. You could also talk about common form, that 1947 thing about drip feeding into the Soviet Union, supplying them with supplies and raw materials from Eastern Europe, and also Comic-Con in 1949, the economic union between the Eastern European countries and the Soviet Union. You can talk about there. As it be the answering the question, desire to expand. Desire to expand. And then if we move on to source C, that is still useful to an extent. But we've also got here about mentioning how Poland owes its freedom to the Soviet Union, which is very, very interesting. Of course, Poland was talked about at the Yalta conference particularly. However, and that, of course, didn't happen in 1945, so you could reference it in the question. However, you could also talk about how its freedom recovery is definitely a bit of a stretch, because, of course, you could reference how it was dominated by the Soviet Union, and also, of course, how it wasn't really much change for many Polish people, because, of course, in World War II, it went from fascist occupation by the Nazis to now just a communist occupation by Stalin, so they're still being occupied there. I think talk about that for source C. And I've already mentioned about how source B is definitely from a Western point of view and source C is from an Eastern point of view. So that's just something you put down. Let's have a look at my answer. Oops. So let's have a look at what I put. So what I put was, firstly, source B is definitely useful to historians studying post-World War II Soviet expansion. Addressing the question is a strong start. The source clearly depicts USSR leader Stalin dancing across his new Soviet satellite states, along with new communist dictator China, and its eyes are turning to France next. China is not actually mentioned in the source here, so why I mentioned China there, I'm not entirely sure, hence why you'll see I got the mark that I did get. However, it's still addressing the question and the source nicely. And of course, a bit of context here. This is also accurate to the Soviet expansion, as after World War II, the Soviets set up their Eastern Bloc, a huge sphere of Soviet influence over Eastern Europe, effectively just turning the country into Soviet colonies. However, Stalin did this as he wanted protection from the West, who he feared was now a threat, especially after forming NATO in 1949. That's a very good, strong first paragraph. Furthermore, now addressing to source C is also accurate to historians studying Soviet expansionism. The source discusses how the USSR practically liberated Poland after World War II, and powerful landlords are no longer in charge, but farmers and workers are instead. I mean, this is actually a very good point that some students would not think about, I think, because at the end of the day, the source is still correct. The Soviet Union did give the power from the landlords to the workers. I mean, that's just communism. Is correct. Although the USSR didn't exactly make Poland free, as the Soviet suggested, as the USSR definitely had total control over countries and secret police. However, they did definitely make the country communist, and it's important in communist ideas, which was a huge change following the Nazi occupation. Again, more context there. Probably have to mention Nazi occupation that is before 1945, when the question is being addressed, but nevertheless, it's a good bit of context. It should be taken into account, however, that the Soviet source also displays positive views on the USSR since it was written by East German communists. That's good, talking about provenance there. So I'd like to display positive views of the USSR. And then for my conclusion, which is actually very long, so both source B and C are accurate when discussing Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe, since they both equally depict the correct opinion that the USSR had expanded its sphere of influence in Western Europe, and also in Eastern Europe, and also they wanted to expand further. Also, the reasons why the USSR wanted to expand more in Eastern Europe also addressed, like in source B, which sees the USSR creeping up on Western Europe and trying to expand its influence further. So again, just in the source, that's good. The reasons why being the USSR setting up Common forming 1947 and the West setting up NATO in 1949, they were all reasons why the USSR expanded further and now wanted to expand now as they felt threatened by the West, like by the Truman Doctrine, wanted to grow communism surveillance across the world. Now, my answer was a level 3. I got 8 out of 12 for that answer. 8 out of 12, definitely not bad at all. And if you're getting 8 out of 12 consistently throughout your GCSE history papers, you're looking at about a grade 6, possibly a grade 7. So it's definitely a solid start. What I could have improved on is simply slightly more referencing to provenance and Leslie bought source B, and also probably a bit of a long conclusion. However, you get the idea, and that is how you should structure your 12 marker question 2 on the Cold War paper. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next YouTube video. Goodbye.